Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be looking at this pretty simple queen versus pawn endgame where we're white and our opponent's black, and we want to just prevent our opponent from getting his king out of his pawn's way and promoting it so that we can win the game using our king-queen checkmate. Now, the first thing you'll probably acknowledge is that if we try to just bring our king closer, then he's going to be able to move his king out of the pawn's way, and he's going to be threatening to promote, which is what he's going to do. And if we just check him, the thing is, he doesn't actually have to move immediately back behind the pawn. He can actually just move away from it. He's still going to be threatening to promote, so we still can't advance our king because his pawn is going to come out. What we have to do is figure out a way to force the king back behind the pawn. And the way we might go about doing that is by checking the king in a way that when he's in that check, the pawn is also under attack, so the only way he can prevent us from taking the pawn is by moving behind it. So I might invite you just for like 3 or 4 seconds just to pause the video and think about how we might do this as white. Maybe in this case, actually, if you have a board at home, you might want to get it out and try to mess around with the position a little bit. Okay, I'm going to assume if you wanted to solve it that you pause the video there. So what we want to do is get our queen close enough so that we can get this position. And so see, now we check in this position, and we're also attacking the pawn. So the only way he can actually prevent us from taking the pawn is by moving the king to d1. And now, if we move the queen to d3, check, this is sort of a fork where we're attacking the king and the pawn simultaneously, and the only way he can keep the pawn is if, instead of moving away from it, he moves behind it. And now we've bought ourselves some time to move our king a bit closer. And really all we have to do is repeat this process. And eventually he's going to be forced to move behind the pawn again. And of course, now we have this simple checkmate in the corner. Now, that's all pretty interesting. A little maybe a bit more complicated than previous exercises we looked at. But I have an interesting question for you. Now, this starting position is a win for white because it is possible for us to basically force the king behind the pawn and slowly move our king closer so that we can then capture it. The queen can capture it with the support of the king. What about this position? Is this also a victory for white? Try to use the same logic as the previous one, where we slowly bring our king closer, and every time he tries to escape, we just kind of indefinitely check him. So the trick with this position is that it's actually a draw, even if white plays it perfectly, because when we get to this position, and this is the position you have to get in order to win, because it's the only position by which we can force the king to move behind the pawn and thus buy ourselves some time to bring our king closer. The trick here is that black doesn't actually have to move behind the pawn. He can move away from it, because if he moves away from it, then when we take, that's going to be stalemate, because his king has nowhere to move, right? Because our queen is covering all those squares. So just this little marginal difference from the king and the pawn being on the e file versus the king and the pawn being on the f file, that alone is a difference between a victory and a draw for white in this endgame. Okay, I hope you enjoyed.